welcome to a brand new episode of Talking Law from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penni MBE, a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester and the founder of Women in the Law UK. Do please visit womeninthelawuk.com to find out more about the work I do, which includes regular webinars covering subjects from how to communicate effectively and how to network with confidence. There are so many different areas to explore, and all of our webinars are available to watch again on YouTube and listen to again as podcasts. There are also a series of Talking Law books which are available on Amazon. The latest, Talking Law 3, celebrates diversity in the law, and you can also find books on employment rights, data protection and criminal law. Today I'm interviewing a barrister who practices from 9 Bedford Row, who is also the former chair of the Young Barristers Committee, Max Hardy. Called in 2004, Max has appeared in a number of murder trials at the Old Bailey and speeding cases at Romford Magistrates Court. He is also the trustee of the Kalisher Trust, which aims to transform the life of young people through the development of advocacy skills. I asked Max about the area of law he works in today and what led him into that field.
Yes, I practice in criminal law, a little bit of regulatory law, but mostly crime. I've got a largely prosecution-based practice. It's probably about 75% prosecution, 25% defence. And I've wanted to be a barrister since I was about 16 years old.
And who inspired that?
I was very lucky to shadow a QC in the Old Bailey Treasury Counsel by the name of Graham Bowl QC, who later went on to become an Old Bailey judge. And it was one of those moments in life where you just have an instant revelation. I walked into the Old Bailey and straight away knew that this is what I had to do in life.
That's so interesting. I want to pick up about some of the activities you've been involved in since becoming a barrister. Why have you taken interest in being a trustee of Kalisher Trust, being a chair of Young Barristers Association? You know, you've written and you've been a legal advisor on various things, and you've done lots of bar placement and outreach work. Just tell us about some of those and why you've put yourself forward.
Yes, well, talk about the Young Bar first. I sometimes say that a collective noun for a group of criminal barristers is a whinge of barristers, because if you ever overhear barristers in robing rooms talking about the state of a bar, there can be a lot of negativity out there. And sadly, a lot of that negativity is well-founded in the sense that since I've been called to a bar in 2004, things have got very, very difficult indeed. And it's difficult to say that things have been improving. But it just seemed to me that it's one thing to complain on the sidelines. It's something else altogether to actually get involved, see things from the inside and try in your own small way to improve the situation. And that's what really caused me to sign up for the Bar Council in the first place.
Yes. Now, what about Kalisher Trust? Can you tell us what it is and why you have become a trustee? I don't think you've starred in any of their productions for fundraising.
Not yet. So I, many years ago, got approached by the recently retired Lady Justice Rafferty, Anne Rafferty, who's a former head of my chambers at 9 Bedford Row. And she was and is a trustee of the Kalisher Trust and was a friend of Michael Kalisher QC, who died much too young in 1996, and was really one of the leading QCs of his generation. And he bequeathed money to create the trust. And the main purpose of the trust is to enable people to become criminal barristers who might otherwise struggle to come to the criminal bar. Very much a focus on non-traditional backgrounds. And when I became the secretary to a trust, its activities were quite narrow in scope. It was really focused on the provision of an annual scholarship. Yes. And since then, it has diversified enormously. And there are now outreach visits to schools and academies. There are advocacy training programs. There are internships with various organisations. And one of the things I've particularly enjoyed, although I've never performed in one of their theatrical fundraising productions, I did participate in a video they made, the trial of Goldilocks for primary schools, and I prosecuted Goldilocks.
I love that. In my research, I saw that, and I thought it was a great little summary of, a lovely children's book with lots of issues.
Yes, I mean, I think children are never too young to start learning about justice. And those of us who are parents, and you're clearly one of them, will know that children have actually an amazingly evolved sense of what is fair and not fair. And I think one of the really important roles that barristers really should be playing nowadays is involvement in public legal education.
Yes. I noticed that one of the activities and videos you've been doing with Kalisher, for example, is to have outreach days for schools as far as Skegness to tell Hamlets. Yes, and to be able to appeal, if you like, to children across the country, which is important work. So that leads me to a question I want to ask you about. I've often said that when we talk about diversity, so my question is, what do you think about diversity at the bar, and how can we do more to improve it?
So it's very simple for me. I think if you have a criminal justice system administered by people that don't look and sound like the society that they serve, it loses legitimacy. People need a sense of buy-in. They want to be able to look at a judge and say, that judge looks and sounds like me, and therefore I will accept that judge's authority. And of course, it's easy to say, well, you should accept the judge's authority come what may because they're a judge. But frankly speaking, people need to feel that they are included and represented. And it's very easy for me to say these things because I am about as traditional a barrister in terms of background as it's possible to get. But I completely agree with you. There needs to be buy-in across the bar as to the importance of diversity. It's diversity of thinking, it's diversity of gender, it's diversity of skin color, of background. It's every kind of diversity is necessary, and none of that should detract in any way from an expectation that standards should be maintained, that the best able people come to a bar. But it's an absolute tragedy to hear still said even today that people feel that the bar's not a place for them because they look around at the bar and they don't see people like them. I do feel that in the time that I've been in practice, there have been some really positive changes in terms of entry at the bottom level of the criminal bar. There are now huge numbers of women coming into the profession.
Yeah.
But the thing that is very alarming is that the attrition rate is as great as it ever was.
Yes.
And you rightly said at the start of this, as a young father, I've really come to understand quite how intensive caring responsibilities fall on the shoulders of women barristers. Lockdown was a real revelation for me because actually I was out of court. My wife was continuing to work from home. And so I was doing all the childcare for all of lockdown. And it's an extraordinary commitment. And I salute those that are involved in that. And I deprecate the fact that the bar remains a very hostile profession for those with caregiving responsibilities.
Yes, and that's why I set up a women's organisation for that very reason. And so it's good to hear, real life experience actually from our male colleagues. And I bet you've never appreciated your better half more now than ever.
That's an absolute understatement.
Now, Max, I've got some questions that I always ask my guests on this podcast. And the first is, can you remember a case that meant the most to you, a memorable case? And sometimes people will say the first case they ever did on their feet. Mine is a pro bono case, which was extraordinary. I wonder if you've got a case that has really, stuck with you throughout your career, because you're over 10 years call now, and you probably don't have the opportunity to reflect very often on that, do you? Is there a case you could share with us and why?
I suppose I'm going to pick a case that I was involved in during an internship when I was working on death penalty appeals in America. And I was involved in it in a very lowly capacity, but this was a man who'd been convicted of contracting his wife's killing for life insurance purposes. And increasing numbers of young UK lawyers go out to the United States to do these death penalty internships. And there's obviously an awful lot of reading that you can do in advance. There's a lot of film treatment of the death penalty. And both the charities, Amicus and Reprieve, I did it with Amicus, lay on some really excellent training. But even allowing for all of that, it's only when you arrive out there and you see the death penalty system up close that you realize what a dangerous and, for me, completely wrong-headed enterprise it is. And going to death row was as dramatic and momentous an experience as I imagined it would be.
Yes, that must have been quite emotional. I want you just to answer this question for me for a moment. You mentioned Amicus, who do fantastic work. I've been very concerned about the impact of COVID on the bar, particularly the criminal bar, which you and I practice at. I have additional areas. And so I wondered if maybe you had any kind of advice or tips for people who will be trying to think about ways to improve their CVs. You know, doing Amicus is a really great thing. I know you do an awful lot outside of the bar, but have you got any kind of 3 tips for people who want to come to the bar about experience or ways in which they could improve their chances?
Yes. So this is where I think social media has been a real godsend for access to the bar. And I feel there has been a really enormous demystification of the bar over the last decade or so. And I hope that a lot of law students out there or school pupils interested in the criminal law can see that there are barristers on social media who are receptive, who will interact with them, will answer questions. And I mean, I perhaps rather boldly at the start of the year did offer a kind of general call out for work experience. And you can imagine how many requests I had, but
Yes.
there are actually quite a number of barristers out there that will lay on lectures, legal training. There are even some heroic criminal barristers that will lay on some paid work experience. So I think that Twitter is a good resource for law students interested in seeing what barristers are saying out there, because obviously all chambers will operate formal mini pupillage application processes, and they can be quite intimidating and off-putting. And I think one of the things I really want to emphasize to anybody interested in the criminal law is that most lawyers, most barristers want to help. They want to give advice, and people shouldn't be frightened about asking for advice.
Yes. Well, Max, back to you, really. You've done an enormous of things outside of you're very busy. You write articles for The Independent and several other papers. You've assisted a secret barrister in writing fake law because he or she thanks you at the end of fake law. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't yet. I didn't know that.
Oh, right. Yeah, he's very good at thanking the enormous amount of barristers who've...
he or she.
Yeah.
I've always believed a she.
I've always said she, and I thought I knew the identity, but enough of that. But you do a number of things, including working closely with Channel 4 on the murder trial, for example, with real barristers, a dramatization. You've also write blogs, and you wrote a blog about I May Destroy You, which was a great television program that we all watched in lockdown, and the Channel 4, the murder trial with real barristers and judge. So I wondered if you had a favourite book and why? And indeed, if you had a favourite fictional lawyer yourself, and then maybe if you could tell us or share with us how you got into writing, because it's wonderful to see.
Yes, I can. So I suppose the fictional lawyer that really turned me on to bar in the first place was way back when I was about 15 or so, reading Great Expectations. And he's not a very sympathetic character in Great Expectations, the barrister Jaggers, who's always washing his hands. And you only come to discover by the end of the book how instrumental he is in steering Pip's life. But one of the things that Jaggers says that I think is a real lesson for life for anybody interested in the law, and not just criminal law, is don't take things on appearances, take them on the evidence. And I think that is a really useful life lesson. I suppose if the bar hadn't worked out, I would have liked to have been a writer. My mother's a journalist, and I really enjoy, as a sideline, blogging about law. I do also blog about parenting and fathering in particular. And that's kind of led to a little bit of newspaper writing, a bit of radio commentary. And then as a complete sideline, which has been really enjoyable, has been advising these TV shows, TV legal shows. And the Channel 4 program that you refer to was an incredibly interesting experiment, which was a murder trial, as you say, using real barristers, a real judge, real police. They assembled essentially a real jury and then used actors to play the witnesses. And it was a half dramatization and then half the actual trial. And it's about as close as you're going to get in England to seeing a murder trial on the screen, because of course there's an absolute prohibition on filming in the Crown Court. The people behind that were able to film parts, at least, of a real murder trial in Scotland. And there was something really quite remarkable about seeing television cameras in a Scottish criminal court. And I think one of the things that I really want to see is as much accuracy as possible in TV legal representations. And I'm not one of these barristers that goes bananas because there's a gavel, although there should never, ever be a gavel anywhere in sight. But I think things that are really unhelpful is if TV shows show very aggressive cross-examination of children or rape complainants or something like that, something that absolutely would not be permitted nowadays. And that can have a very negative impact on people's perception of the criminal justice system. So the shows that I've been involved in, I've always tried to keep that side of things as accurate as possible.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Just a quickie one, really, Max, about well-being. I've been a great advocate to ensure that people burn bright and don't burn out. I can't say I'm very good at it. I work in the night, long hours, and some of the activities I've been doing during lockdown, walking for male suicide prevention, those things have really brought it to a fore that we need to get better. What do you do for your well-being and to kind of have some semblance of balance in your own practice and in your own life?
The thing that I really enjoy is swimming in lakes and rivers, what some people get incredibly annoyed about when it gets called wild swimming, because people say, well, it's just swimming. And actually, I have a little personal commitment to myself, which is if I ever go to court by the sea, so Bryden or Hove, somewhere like that, I will always swim, regardless of the time of year. Even if it's January, I'll go and jump in the sea. And then in London, I like doing that a lot in the Hampstead Ponds. The thing that I really enjoy, but I very rarely get to do, is taking myself away completely on my own to go cycling in Wales. Yeah. And I've done that a couple of times. And I also cycled across the Carpathian Mountains in Romania a good few years back. And that kind of solo voyaging, I think, is incredibly restorative and beneficial.
huge thank you to Max Hardy for talking law with me, Sally Penni MBE. Please do catch up with my previous episodes where you can hear interviews with guests such as high-profile criminal barrister Joanna Hardy and the current president of the Law Society, I, Stephanie Boyce. If you've enjoyed the podcast, do share Talking Law with your friends or colleagues, and do subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow me on Twitter at SallyPenny1 or search for Sally Penni or Women in the Law UK on LinkedIn or Instagram. And don't forget the extensive resources for anyone working within the law available at womeninthelawuk.com. Thanks to our production team, Sam Walker and Michael Blaze at What Goes On Media. Bye for now.